Yo, what up? It's Digi, bro. Just threw up super fucking hard after tearing my body to shreds at the Denzel Curry show in Boston. I'm here to talk about my response to the Goblin Slayer response to the video I clipped from a live stream where someone asked me what I thought of Goblin Slayer, and I memed on it real fucking hard. And there was a bunch of comments trying to basically explain the first episode to me and like what, because at one point I say I don't understand why the party was just like getting utterly demolished by the goblins. People were like, well, maybe if you didn't skip the first 8 fucking minutes of the episode, you'd see that the whole point is that they were unprepared and they were getting their asses kicked. Now, first of all, I would say, why wasn't that communicated visually? Like, I understand that it was shown that the characters were not like capable up until that point, but during the battle, it just looks like they're not doing anything. It just looks like they are ineffectively standing around. Now, I understand that they probably either used the manga as like a direct reference point for this or the original source material, but like in those contexts, in a medium where time is relative, where you don't have the sensation of things transpiring in real time, then it doesn't make you question why a guy who is standing 10 feet away is not doing something to help a person who's right next to them. Um, Now, granted, the scene was also just like edited confusingly, and it's possible that I have even less of an understanding of it than I would have thought, just because of the fact that I didn't watch, everything leading up to it, like even like the visuals, but like it just seemed kind of like a clusterfuck. But even more importantly than that, a lot of the comments I'm seeing are about how it's like, oh, it's like a classic D&D campaign, and that's the appeal, is that it's like this is the party and they were unprepared and that's why they failed, is that they don't have the right equipment and they're rolling bad essentially. Uh I don't understand why that is so appealing to people to watch a show that feels like D&D, because this is not the first time I've seen this. People say that about like Delicious in Dungeon and a bunch of other stuff. They're like, "Oh, it feels like a D&D campaign and that's why it's cool." Like D&D, the whole point of it is that it's giving structure to just a bunch of people having a collective imaginary experience. Like, it's a fantasy novel in itself is like a guy with a vision for an interesting world and set of rules, like making that vision reality. And that's what makes it interesting. A D&D campaign is a bunch of people who aren't creative enough to make up their own fantasy world, or who just want to do it as part of a clique, like to have something to do with their friends, having a structure by which to do that. And I think inherently it is narratively less interesting than a story, because the point of it isn't to be narratively interesting. It's not to have, good pacing or a coherent narrative structure. It's to be something that you and your friends do together. It's more about the experience of sharing it. And granted, when super funny people do D&D campaigns together and broadcast them, that can be an enjoyable experience. But again, it's not because they are good stories. It's because those people are fun to watch. So when people praise a fantasy story for being like D&D, it feels like we've done some kind of weird fucking Ouroboros reach around up our own assholes. It's like the whole point of D&D is to systematize a collaborative fantasy. So to take that and then reverse engineer it is like, just write a fantasy novel. If you want to make a D&D campaign that's a story, just write a story. You don't need to use the facade of the rules of D&D, because they're not inherently interesting. They're just there to give structure to this game. So if people are like, "Oh, it feels like a D&D campaign," I'm like, Why would that make a good story? Why would I think that makes it better? Especially because I fucking hate Dungeons and Dragons. So, clearly not for me. Clearly for a different audience. In fact, I hate all tabletop games. I'm an asshole and I don't like anybody.